Our next speaker, I'd like to introduce the one, the only, Hanna Boethius. It is.
Thank you. Awesome. Hope you all had a good lunch. All the three of you who are here. That's great. Awesome. Let's do this. So imagine yourself on a roller coaster. Sit down in the train, maybe in the front if you're really daring, and you get strapped in and hooked in and all of that stuff that they do, and it slowly starts taking off. And then in the beginning it's really slow, right? You don't really notice that you're on a roller coaster or anything, but then it starts going up. Slowly but surely, it huffs and puffs up the first hurdle, and then that's when it starts. You go down full force, you are so excited and scared and adrenaline rushed and everything at once, and if you like it, that's a good thing. If you don't like it, maybe not so great. But we all have different reactions to things, and when you have done that tour once or twice, you leave that roller coaster with two possible emotions. Either, oh my God, I gotta do it again, or, holy no, that was not for me. Living with type 1 diabetes is kind of the same, funnily enough, except you don't get the fun part of a roller coaster. You get the really, really bad stuff that you know is gonna damage you in one way or another. And this is, of course, not very good for your health. And I'll let you know in this presentation why. But first, we'll talk a little bit about me, because why else would I be on stage? My name is Hanna Boethius, and I help people with diabetes to feel healthier and happier in their own care with some of the things that I will present to you today. I'm also a type 1 diabetic, which I've been diagnosed in 1985, so I was 2 years old. On this picture, I think I had been diagnosed for about a year. So I'm 3 on the picture. It's about exactly 1 year after I got diagnosed. And yeah, that's when everything started for me. My parents at the time got the standard, beautiful, great, well-meaning advice that diabetics still get today of eating lots of carbs. Don't even look at the fat because you're going to keel over and die. And, you know, protein, yeah, well, it's protein. You don't have to do anything with it. It's not that nutritious, so, you know, you don't have to care. But this was, of course, all wrong. Giving a type 1 diabetic the advice of eating 60 grams of carbs with every meal is about the most damaging thing you can do. It causes the roller coaster you just saw in terms of blood sugars. When blood sugars go high, insulin goes high, and we have the whole roller coaster, and that is not what's going to keep you healthy and well for a long time. So I was struggling with my diabetes for 26 years. I was trying to ride this roller coaster as well as I could with the right, with the right amount of insulin to cover all those carbs that I was told to eat. Now, of course, things have gotten easier in the past couple of years with medical advancements and stuff, so now I don't just have my heart on my sleeve, I also have my pancreas on my hip and my sensors here and there. But it's gotten easier, but that does not mean that the nutritional advice given still today is what it should be. So when I was struggling growing up with diabetes, I didn't, of course, notice much because I didn't know anything at 2 years old. What was happening to me? Why was my mom chasing me with a huge needle every couple of hours? And all of these things that might be traumatizing for a young child. And growing up, becoming a teenager and all of this stuff, it just wasn't easy. In addition to all the carbs, all the insulin, and the teenage hormones came all crashing down at once. And I gave up. There was no point. There was no point for me to check my blood sugar. It didn't help anyway. I only got the stupid numbers with several digits that I shouldn't have. Or going to the doctors. That was no point. I was anyways just being cursed at for doing a bad job. Or, anything, even taking my insulin at times because it only went wrong. So why should I bother? Of course, I didn't know then what I luckily know today, that it was all based on the wrong advice. And that is, of course, maybe not, I'm not very grateful for that, but I'm happy I found my way in the end. So, as you can see, until I lowered my amount of carbs, that is when my life really, really changed. And this was in 2011 when I was re-educating myself to become a nutrition coach. And my teacher pointed me out in front of the class when we were talking about carbs and insulin and how that works in the body, which is, quite complex. And I thought I knew it. I had no idea. And he seriously saved my life when he told me that, Hanna, if I were you, I would think twice what you put in your mouth because you don't even make insulin. So that was my wake-up call. Happy came 26 years later, rather than not at all. And now then, since 2011, I've been lowering my carbs gradually. Started off with a liberal paleo approach until now being ketogenic. And it works for type 1s. We'll also get to that. So a little disclaimer, I do not have any official medical education. But in comparison to those who do, this works. So, also another disclaimer is that I am the proud co-founder of the Low-Carb Universe, which is an event in Europe that is 100% low-carb and will take place in Mallorca, Spain in November this year. Moving on. So welcome to my Lower Your A1C masterclass. Of course, this is going to be slightly abbreviated. Otherwise, I could stand here all day, all night, talking to you guys about this stuff. So what is HbA1c? It is, simplified terms, it is your average blood sugar, or it corresponds to your average blood sugar for the past 8 to 12 weeks, which is, of course, highly debated because some people say that it's weighted, so the past couple of weeks count more than others and all this stuff. But generally speaking, it is your average blood glucose level for the past 8 to 12 weeks. This is what they actually measure in an A1C test, though, is your red blood cells, your HB. They get sticky when they're exposed, or they get stuck on by sugar when they are exposed to excess sugar. And what the A1C test actually measures is the level of glycation of your red blood cells in your blood. So basically, if you have an A1C level of 6, that means 6% of your red blood cells are glycated, have too much sugar on them. If you have 7, 8, it's corresponding percentages. And what I find interesting is the goal range for these things. So this is the official goal range, or sort of what is considered normal, which is under 5.6%. And pre-diabetes is then from 5.7 to 6.4%, which, in my opinion, and from all the research that I know now that I didn't know then, is way too high. At 5.6%, you are basically far into pre-diabetes, from what I understand now, and from all the stuff that I've learned in later years. And then diabetes is over 6.5%, which is can already be damaging, but it is not even the goal for most type 1 diabetics. Most type 1 diabetics get a goal of 7 to 8% of A1C, which is, in short, disastrous. So there is also a huge discrepancy of what is taught and what is actually reality. So this is the 50 shades of diabetes. Have to get in a little joke somewhere in this. Quite serious. And for me, growing up, and especially as a teenager, my levels were here. They're double-digit A1Cs because of terrible, terrible, horrible control. And then when I started working on it, after many, many trials and errors, I tried everything from swapping insulin types to trying this carb instead of that carb, this food instead of that food, but it just never worked because I ended up on this last darkest red pretty shade of red, but, disastrous level. And if I can work myself slowly but surely from this level up here to a green level, almost completely healthy, after 33 years of type 1 diabetes, I'm sure every single one of you can do a good job too. But it's not just the A1C. Like, you also want, because the A1C is based on your average blood glucose level, all of these 3 lines, these are CGM graphs that show in real time where your blood sugar is at all times. All these 3, number 1, number 2, and number 3, have the same A1C and the same average blood glucose level, which is about 154 milligram per deciliters and about an A1C of 7. But just as important as it is to have a good, healthy, normal A1C level, which 7 is not, it is also very, very important to have a low standard deviation of your blood glucose levels. So that's why in this case, you would want to be seeing number 3 rather than number 1, because number 1 is the roller coaster that I mentioned in the first place. So is 2 to a lesser extent, but the 3 is more like sugar surfing. So yeah, that's why this is a twofold thing, because you need to have a good A1C. That's great, fantastic, and if you do, enjoy it, but that is not going to be possible to be measured if you only measure a morning blood glucose level and your A1C every couple of months at the doctor's office. And this is, of course, also an indicator. A1C is also an indicator of the progression of possible diabetes complications, and we all have heard this to death and boredom about, cardiovascular disease, going blind, amputations, nerve damage, renal damage, all of this stuff. But this is what happens when your A1C goes up. So the more, even though the DCCT trial can be discussed and ripped apart in many ways, this is a great indicator to show how quickly you actually are more prone to get complications from diabetes. So the blue one is diabetic retinopathy. That is where you possibly go blind from diabetes. Nephropathy is, of course, your kidneys. Neuropathy is when your nerves get damaged, which could lead to amputations. And microalbuminuria is also to do with the kidneys. And there you can see, even though this chart only starts from 6%, which I already said, that is way too high already there you have an increased risk. And if you go to double digits, where I was for a very long time, there you go, tenfold risk of these things. And no one really shows you that this is clearly the case. They tell you to take your insulin, cover your food with it, and eat so many carbs. Just eat carbs, cover for it with insulin is a great piece of advice that I've gotten for many, many years with my diabetes. The thing is, it doesn't work, because you end up here with lots of complications. You end up with lots of things that you don't want, because diabetes in and on itself is hard enough to control. So you don't need these other things to take care of as well. But then, of course, people, say, but Hanna, if you are ketogenic, if you eat ketogenic as a type 1 diabetic, you're going to go into diabetic ketoacidosis. No, but the thing is, the difference between being in nutritional ketosis and diabetic ketoacidosis is huge. It's huge. Diabetic ketoacidosis definitely means a death wish state. You would rather be dead than to be in a DKA. It is when the body gets over acidic, there's too many ketones, and you get dehydrated like crazy. You go in and out of consciousness. You need to be, of course, in an IV hookup at the hospital at the intensive care unit, which is not the most fun experiences that I've had. But funnily enough, that has only happened when I've eaten lots of carbs, had to cover it with lots of insulin, and not had normal blood sugars. Because as long as you have normal blood sugars, which is, you can see the HbA1c level at the bottom, and as of, 5.5, it starts going progressively up, the chance of your diabetic ketoacidosis. The way that you don't get yourself into diabetic ketoacidosis is actually quite simple, even as a type 1. It is to keep an eagle eye on your blood sugars, it is to keep hydrated, and it is to take the insulin that you need and not compare it to anyone else, because that's not good. So, my first, masterclass point really in practical tips on how to lower your A1C is, of course, eat low carb. It's a no-brainer. It shouldn't be discussed anymore, although it is, and I'm really angry at that. But eating low carb is definitely key for you to start controlling your blood sugars better. And of course, the less carbohydrates you consume, the less insulin you will have to take, and you have less of a roller coaster. Because you don't eat the stuff that directly, very harshly influences your blood sugar. Of course, next is intermittent fasting. That also helps, if nothing else, because on keto and low carb, you're generally not as hungry anymore. But if nothing else, it helps you to keep your blood sugar level for that many more hours. So that is a great tip for keeping your blood sugars more stable. Of course, we also can go into the discussion. No, actually, let's not. But I'll mention it, that finding your way of doing low carb is essential in this. Some people do great on 100 grams of carbs a day. Some people do fantastically on 10 or 0 or nothing. And everything in between there is fair game. And I am a huge proponent of playing around with your macros as long as you know what you're doing. And I have, for example, myself just recently found even more success with, and now I'm going to swear in keto church, but slightly lowering my fat intake whilst upping my protein a little bit. We're talking about 5% or something. So that switch really, really has helped me lately. And this is an ongoing process. Just because you think that you found your low carb for right now, doesn't mean that it's not going to change in the future, or doesn't mean that it's the same as 2 weeks ago. And the law of small numbers. This is my favorite, especially insulin-dependent diabetes tip for anyone. The law of small numbers, which is coined by Dr. Richard Bernstein, who's written a fantastic book called Diabetes Solution. He says that if you eat a small amount of carbs, you have to cover it with a small amount of insulin. This is why you don't get these huge, big roller coasters that I was talking about in the beginning, but you get the nice, slow surf. Unless you're on stage and, your adrenaline is going, and that might destroy things for you anyway, but we'll see about that. The second tip is medication. And this is not medical advice, definitely not. This is just a few rules of thumb that may or may not be applicable to you. So you have to make sure that you take the right amount of background or basal insulin. This is the one that keeps for a long time and keeps your, if you're not eating, it should keep your blood sugar stable. Normal people, non-diabetics, have the same thing. It's just they don't notice it. There's always a little bit of insulin being produced by the pancreas. So you have to check that this is actually on point and that this manages to keep your blood sugars in a normal, healthy range. The way to do this is to do a fasting test. If you are on insulin, don't eat for a certain amount of hours so that you can see, and do constant blood sugar checking so that you can see how your blood sugar changes, because that is an indicator of that your background insulin is either too high and then you go low in terms of blood sugar, or it's too little and you go high in terms of blood sugar. Also make sure that if you're taking insulin, that the mealtime insulin dosing is correct, because this can, of course, put a few sticks in your wheel, to put it that way. It can trip you up, because if you don't know how much you should dose for a certain amount of carbs, which is also where not eating so many carbs helps a lot. So make sure that these two are set properly. And this, of course, anyone who lives with an insulin-dependent form of diabetes knows this, that this is not a constant. This can change from day to night, from yesterday to tomorrow, all around. It can change. So I do have to thank diabetes for being able to it always keeps me on my toes. So that's at least something good about it. Also, would there be a possibility for you to talk to your doctor and reduce your medication? Maybe you don't need as much anymore if you're on low carb. Or maybe you don't need the blood pressure medicine that you also got prescribed, or even the statin. Maybe you can kick that out because your blood sugars and your cholesterol have gotten so much better. And also Dawn phenomenon. You have to find out if you do have a problem with Dawn phenomenon, which is when your liver starts giving you tons of energy early in the morning so that you can get up and seize the day and catch the flies and all that stuff. You don't even have to be stressed for this to be a problem. This happens automatically and naturally, but it could be something that you have to work with in terms of insulin dosing. Number 3. Blood sugar checks. This is a CGM line from, maybe it's even mine, I don't remember. But this is a very, very nice and stable and low and normal blood sugar, and this is what you're aiming for. It's a goal. It's not going to be from the beginning, but it is a goal. So you need to keep an eagle eye on your blood glucose levels. This, along with low carb, is the number one thing to do. So you have to check, not just in the morning, but if you want to have a real check, you need to get yourself a CGM device or Freestyle Libre or whatever is available nowadays. And you have to know exactly where your blood glucose is before every meal, after every meal, between every meal, in the morning, in the evening. It is a constant finger pricking in the beginning until you sort of get a check of what is actually going on in your body together with all these factors. And this is actually quite a neat trick. Most blood glucose meters have a function where it shows you your average blood glucose level in the past 10, 14, 30, 90 days. Use this knowledge. If you see that your average blood glucose level for the past 90 days, which is basically corresponding to an A1C test period, is, let's say, 5.6 or 102 or something, then always try to aim for blood glucose values slightly underneath this. In this way, your average blood glucose will go down, and so, of course, will your A1C level. And for the love of everything holy, if you are an insulin-dependent diabetic and you do go low and have a hypoglycemic happening event, please treat that with glucose tabs, because that is the most exact way to know how your blood sugar will react. And this can, of course, this is very individual, this varies from person to person, and just for me, going from a high-carbing, even 200 grams of carbs a day, to now very few carbs, that has changed in how reactive my blood sugar is to carbohydrates. So before I had to treat low blood sugar with 20, 30 grams of carbs in one go, which was about a juice pack. And now if I would happen to go a little bit low, I can treat it with 2 grams of glucose, 4 maybe if it's a really bad one. So this also changes, so that is something to keep a lookout on if you do go low carb. And then here we have the next big one. Stress. This can really influence your blood sugar. Not a lot of people know that or have first-hand experience with it, but as my CGM curve will tell me when I get off this stage, this is definitely the case. So stress makes you insulin resistant, actually. So that is what causes type 2 diabetes, when your body does not, or your cells do not, recognize the insulin that you are producing and therefore doesn't take it and use it. This can, of course, stress can also be inflammation in the body, and I know we heard about that this morning, but inflammation is definitely a big stressor that can really mess with your blood sugars and therefore your A1C. So make sure that you don't have any inflammation. And this actually the biggest hidden inflammation is actually dental. So in case you have erratic blood sugars for no reason, maybe you should go to your dentist and get a checkup. And of course, stress is also your emotions, your fears, your expectations not being met. Stress is essentially when you are in a state that you don't want to be, or in a place, or in a situation, or you experience something. And this was, of course, really, really logical when we were still maybe not as advanced as we are today. But, you know, it was about running away from predators, or, just really simple stuff. But today, everything is stressors. There are bright lights everywhere, the bus is late, your phone is going the whole time, and this person didn't return your call, and yeah, we just have even food. Let's not talk about that. Even food is a stressor nowadays. So we have a lot more stressors today than we had a couple of years ago even. And this is where you can do a lot with stress prevention and stress management. So what I see as stress management is what you can do in the acute phase, like when you get really stressed, when you find out you're late for a meeting, or when you missed something that you shouldn't have, or something like that. And for example, stress management like that, for me personally, this might not be something to do when you have a stressful meeting with your boss and all this, but I like to roll out my yoga mat and do a little bit of yoga and stretching, which, you know, your boss might look frown upon. But other things, for example, are breathing exercises that you can do pretty inconspicuously. And if you have a moment to yourself, for example, things like EFT tapping can really, really help to calm your nervous system. Stress prevention, there, of course, a huge thing is meditation, and do that regularly, not just when you think that you should, but actually feel that it is a good thing for you and that it helps you. Yoga again, exercise, all of these things that are very, very good for preventing stress in general. And then the next one, I just love this picture, it's so beautiful. But movement, I don't like the word exercise, so I'm not going to use that, but I use movement. Because the movement, you need to find something that you enjoy. You shouldn't go to the gym because your friend is going. You shouldn't go hiking if you don't like heights. You shouldn't go horseback riding if you're actually afraid of horses. You shouldn't do yoga if it sounds flaky to you, you know? You have to find what motivates you and what you enjoy and where you get the most pleasure out of doing. Because movement really is life. If we don't move, we can't live. And actually, if we don't move, we don't really have that much health. So sitting in an office chair all day, all night is probably not the best idea. And also, this, in direct relation to diabetes, this of course improves your insulin sensitivity, which makes it possible for you to not maybe have to take all of that insulin that is prescribed. In, accordance with your doctor clearly, and in accordance with all of these other things that I've shown you. And now I think I have a little gift for you guys. So these are just my top 5 tips. I have a whole list of them on my website, which you are more than welcome to download. So get your phones out if you want to take a screenshot or something, because you can download that here and get my full list of my A1C, lower your A1C checklist, and find out my other tips, which are just as exciting, I promise. Anyway, there we go, hello. Let's go into my little summary. So number 1, eat low carb. How low carb and how your macros work out for you, that is your thing to find out, and there are plenty of people that can help you along on that ride. But eating low carb is really the first key to lowering your A1C levels. Make sure that you take the correct medications and the correct amount of medication. And this has to be talked about with your doctor clearly, but this is a key thing to actually making sure that everything runs smoothly. Blood glucose levels, keep an eagle eye on them. That is really, you have to do that. Otherwise, you won't get control of anything because you won't know where anything is. And as I said, aim for that slightly lower than your average, slightly below your average blood sugar level. Number 4, stress less. Find out what you can do to make your life less stressful. Find out what you can do to make your life more enjoyable so you don't have to stress that much. Maybe you're in the wrong job. Maybe you're in a situation at home that you don't want to be in. Maybe you have taken on too much. Make sure that you do what is right for you. And movement. Movement is key for this all to work together. This is a very holistic process, so you have to work on it from many angles. But movement is joy, movement is life, and make sure that you get enough of it. And as a last little tidbit, this beautiful quote from Confucius, of course. It does not matter how slowly you go to get your A1C down, as long as you do not stop. Thank you. And I even have time for questions, if there are any. Hurry, hurry. So many people in line.
So do you address the 1.5 person? Do you know what I mean? Like your specialty, of course, is type 1.
Yeah.
And if somebody is kind of in between, do you know what I mean? Is there any difference in protocol, where someone says, well, I don't have enough beta cells, so therefore I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that. I'm special, I'm different.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. And the other part of that is if you have someone who's been on a ketogenic diet for a long time who didn't think that they were diabetic and went and fasted a little bit too long maybe before their A1C test and ended up with an A1C of like 1.1, is this person now needing to go to an endocrinologist, or is that phenomenal, or is that person lacking beta cells or on their way to type 1?
An A1C of 1.1.
I'm not A1C, I'm sorry, fasting insulin.
Aha, fasting insulin. Well, that type 1 can only be confirmed really with antibody tests.
Okay.
So they will have to get antibodies tested, and any doctor can do that. That's fine. And regarding your question of 1.5 or LADA, that makes it more tricky. Mm-hmm. It really does, because you have these unexpected bursts of self-produced insulin that you can't really control. And if you then also are taking exogenous insulin at the same time, it can get very uncontrollable, absolutely. So that is a trickier concept. That even makes type 1 look a little bit simple, although it really isn't. But there at least you have the complete lack of insulin.
Got it.
So there you have only the external insulin to work with. In type 2s, you only have the internal, but in 1.5, you have mixed. And that makes it it makes it tricky, but not impossible to figure out.
And is your suggestion to stay away from insulin and to try to do as much ketogenic diet and fasting as possible, or not necessarily?
Not for type 1.
And 1.5?
Not for 1.5 either, because you still
don't
don't have
some.
enough.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
So that has to be properly harvested with checked out with the doctor and stuff.
Okay.
With antibody tests and everything.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a type 2 diabetic.
Uh-huh.
I'm very well controlled. I've been
Awesome.
on keto since September, and I'm a 5.3 A1C.
Whoop, whoop.
But I do have high in regards to my other blood sugars in the morning, the dawn phenomenon, like 110, 115. Is there any risk to that, and is there anything I should do to improve that?
What happens after the morning test?
After meals, I'm typically normal range, like 75 to 95. So don't worry about it.
I wouldn't worry too much about it, because it's still within sort of an okay range. So unless you You're not on medication?
No.
No. Then, unless the other blood sugar levels start rising as well, I wouldn't actually care too much about it. You could do, of course, a lot with supplements as well, like berberine and stuff, which really helps type 2s to be more sensitive even. So maybe that could be something to check out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Also with the type 2, so right, my father has type 2 diabetes, and he also he has heart disease.
Okay.
Only is living off of one heart artery.
Okay.
The other 4 are completely dead. Do you think the ketogenic diet is something for him to look into? And if so, what is a way to go about it to talk to his doctor about it?
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one. That is actually the hard question. Whether ketogenic or low carb is
Or
good.
low carb, yeah, either way.
Ketogenic or low carb is good for him, definitely. If he has a diabetes diagnosis, definitely. Anyone with such a diagnosis should be lowering up on carbs. And I saw a great thing, actually, which is quite funny in relation to the doctor's thing. I saw a great thing, I think it was on Instagram, someone shared that it was, ketogenic or low carb diets with, all these fresh foods and whole foods and freshly prepared and everything. And that is, it's limiting, and it's not recommended, and it's frowned upon, and it's not healthy and not sustainable. And then you have all this packaged food. But that is, endorsed by the ADA or the AHA or all these people. So I think everyone benefits, whatever, as long as they are alive, I think they really benefit from fresh, whole foods, real foods approach. And then carbs and stuff can be figured out, absolutely. And not everyone has to go ketogenic. It's just very many people feel great on it.
So one more thing on that. His A1C was measured last week at 11.9.
Wow.
Yeah. What would you say the number one thing for me to be able to look at and help him out with, do you think?
Low carb.
Low carb?
Yeah.
More so than keto, right? Just go
Yeah.
low carb first?
Just start slow and really just in steps.
Awesome. Thank you.
That is the easiest way.
I
Hi.
have a gal that works for me. She has a daughter that's probably 3 now,
Yeah.
and she's type 1 diabetic.
Huh?
She's on an insulin pump now.
Yes.
But interesting, her doctor that deals with her, they feed her heavy with carbs because she's not gaining weight.
Yeah.
And just kind of want to get some feedback on how to approach her on this, and maybe where she can go and get more information that might be a little bit the other side of the story.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry I'm laughing. It's just I was
pretty
waiting for someone to bring this up so I could actually bring this out. But definitely, there are so many kids with type 1 who do low carb so successfully. The only difference is that they really have to focus on protein, because kids grow, if you were listening to Maria Emmerich's talk earlier, kids grow on protein and essential fat sources. That's it. Carbs are actually not, they're fattening, yes, but they're not essential for brain or body development, really. And this is why the book I mentioned earlier, Dr. Richard Bernstein's Diabetes Solution, it is the diabetic Bible, the equivalent of. And there is a Facebook group, actually, called Type 1 Grit, that is based on his principles, and there are thousands of type 1 children who thrive, and their parents thrive in there because they are following his approach, which is low carb, high protein. And that's how they grow, and they achieve phenomenal things, these kids, and it's so much fun to be in there to see what they achieve, both physically but also mentally, and scholarships and all these things that come up. So carbs are not essential, and I wish my parents would have known that at that age.
One of the things that I notice when she works for me is she's constantly having her phone go off.
Yeah.
Insulin, blood sugar is going high, blood sugar is low. That number 3 graph that you showed there, constantly happens. So thank you.
And that's the really sad part, because that is the sad reality for the vast majority of type 1s and also type 2s, but you might not know about it. Thank you. Hi there.
Hello, Hannah. How are you doing?
Hi. Good. How are you?
Doing great, thanks to you and
Thank
and
you.
my wife, Stephanie Gaspolo. My blood A1C used to be up in the teens.
I
I'm
know,
not going
right?
to say the number, but thanks to following you and my wife in a low carb diet, got it from the teens down to 6.6 right now.
Wow, that's great. Fantastic. Great
Yes.
progress. That's awesome.
And dropped a lot of weight, and my doctor actually gave me a new Medtronic insulin pump, so I've been using that for the last couple of months. The only question is, when I get down to the 60s and I don't feel it anymore,
Yeah.
and then I test my sugar and I see 60 or 62.
Yeah.
First thing I want to do, I think, okay, I got to bring it up. But then my wife said, I take 1 or 2 glucose tablets.
Yay.
How do you feel? I mean, how long did it take you to get adjusted to that? Because me, I'm still sort of, when I get down to that number, I'm still sort of not comfortable.
It is definitely more a mental thing rather than a physical thing. I remember when I was in the 60s eating high carb and having all that free insulin in my body still active because I had to take so much from my meals. And it felt terrible. I was shaky, I was sweaty, I was pale, I was incoherent. You can ask this guy, he knows all about it. And it was absolutely terrible. And then I had to jack it up with so much carbs and then, back up on the roller coaster again, that has helped me so much with going this low carb because now I only need, as I said, very small things to correct up to a level where I feel comfortable. Seeing that number, yes, it can be very scary, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you have the same reaction as before because your body is now more able to use the glucose that you do have and the ketones that you do have, and actually the ketones have been shown to protect your brain when you are going for a lower blood sugar. So in the 60s I wouldn't drive, I wouldn't probably do much, but I don't get the same panic feelings anymore as I did before. So you have a lot more time to correct it because you don't have that load of insulin still beating down on you. You only have that little, and it's probably soon out of your system.
Do you have your sensor going off a lot?
No, just today.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I think we're done, even on time. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.